Hello, welcome to Disruptive by Design. I'm Kimberly Underwood, Director of Digital News Media here at AFCEA International. Welcome to this episode where I sit down with Michael Gresens, who is a Master Sergeant in the U.S. Air Force, and he is currently at PACAF, the Pacific Air Forces, in Honolulu, and he will be moving to a new position. So that it's so great to talk to him and get his perspective of what operating in the AOR, the area of responsibility of the Indo-Pacific, is like, and really the challenges they face as far as the Air Force. And also, he's been instrumental in AFCEA's Hawaii chapter, to the chapter as a whole, but also to the Emerging Leader Group, which is people under 40. Just an amazing, amazing fellow, and so grateful for his efforts, and so glad that he could share his perspective. With that, enjoy Disruptive by Design.
I've been at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, or as we like to call it, Hickam Air Force Base, for about 8 years. Actually, it will be 8 years in December, so it's going to be exactly 8 years when I actually leave here. And I feel very well-rounded in the different things that go on. I got to experience a lot. Started out as the A6 MCCC. We called it the PACAF Cyber Fusion Center at the day. When I first heard about that assignment, I'm like, PACAF Cyber Fusion Center? What does that do? Little did I know that PACAF is always on the cutting edge of, hey, let's try to do something differently. Let's try to do something better. Let's try to mix things up a little bit. And so anyways, I'm an optimist. I thought a long time ago, I was like, I'm a realist. And no, I realized I'm an optimist. I'm actually always optimistic about the future. I'm always optimistic about change, regardless of what the change is. So I said, oh, I don't know what the PACAF Cyber Fusion Center is, but I'm going to go to that and I'm going to do my best. And I found out it's a MAGCOM MCCC, which stands for, MCCC stands for MAGCOM Communications Coordination Cell. I did about 2.5 years there. I went over to the 15th Wing. I felt very, very fortunate to be able to get this opportunity. Worked with a really great team with the F-22 squadron. This was actually a great opportunity for me. It gave me a chance to really lead, dig in, take charge of their cyber program, and I was so busy. I was running from the time I got to work to the time that I left, and I could have kept running even past that time. But I had hard stops because I had to get my kids from school sometimes. So it's not as easy as just like I could have worked 12-hour days easily there and kept going. But I did my best there, and the Air Force picked me for promotion. I guess when you're talking about promotion categories, it was like the number 3 pick, or I was in the second category or something like that for Master Sergeant. I really attribute that to my commander there, Lieutenant, well, he's Colonel now, Colonel Versailles, and just letting me rip, I guess. And I think the pilots appreciated that. We did a lot of great things.
PACAF is at the forefront. I mean, I know that
Yes.
airports have been pursuing ACE for several years, but I feel like PACAF was at the forefront of that, of testing that and experimenting and implementing it.
Yeah, we definitely are. There was some weak links that, that I found as I was working there. And that was, the ability for us to get communications wherever we wanted it, whenever we wanted it. And, PACAF was also working on technology that was great for that. And that was commercial CSFC. It stands for Commercial Solutions for Classified. I was very impressed with that and our ability to really keep a unit functioning, whether they get combat comm support or not, is really what that comes down to, in my opinion. It sums it up to, hey, I give you a computer, you get commercial internet to that computer, I can give you all the information that you need to fly your aircraft. And when we used it like that, we had a distributed force posture. When we were with a bunch of units, they all were consolidated in the tent. I'm like, our guys were everywhere. We were working all over the place. We had our communication set up, and the other fighter squadrons, their tent was busy. Ours was not. Our tent was not busy. Our combat comm approved tent was not busy. We had a few people that were using it. We were using more in-house capabilities that we had set up. And that was all attributed to Commercial Solution for Classified, and it gave our pilots a really survivable footprint when we were deployed. And max capabilities is really it.
I remember when I was learning about ACE and speaking to some pilots who were doing, experimenting about it, and they said, oh, well, under ACE, we might have to turn around our own planes, like in some remote, island. And I thought, really, you're gonna do the maintenance and turn around your plane? And they just said, oh, that's easy. Like it wasn't, I mean, sure, it was more work, but they weren't worried about it.
Yeah, no, they don't. The work is part of the job. They put in the time. I will say that. I cyber guy, I put in a lot of time there, but when I would get to work, the pilots would already be there. And when I would leave, well, granted, there were two sets of pilots, there were the morning flyers and the evening flyers, but they were some of the same guys were still there doing their working on their debrief and all that other stuff. And I'm like, man, these guys work hard. And someone was like, hey, Mike, you should be a pilot. You should come join the F-22s. And I was like, oh, man, that is tempting. I'll be honest. I've had dreams of being like, man, I really want to do this. It does call to me. Believe me, I get that. I get that feeling every now and then to go for it. But still, I really love what I do. And I'd rather support them in this capacity, understand what they do, and then support them by giving them the technology and the connections that they need.
And were any of your roles, I know kind of maybe you were in planning and that kind of thing, but were any of your roles under like mission defense teams or cyber protection teams? Did that come into it all, or was it a different kind of cyber capability or comms capability?
So I actually did work with I'm not going to say worked with them. I've had limited work with MDTs. We actually did try to do an MDT with the F-22s. I took some training. We were looking at how, to secure, how to look for ports and things like that, and vulnerability, weak points. And so we had some training. I'm not going to say that we failed. We just were too busy. We were two guys, and we supported about 4 or 5 different networks. And you have two guys supporting 4 or 5 different networks. It's really hard to pick something new off the ground. I think there's ways to leverage the MDTs and, well, really the MDTs. I won't say the CPTs. CPTs are more like response to a critical issue. But the MDTs, I just, I'm not really in a position to make that kind of a change. I think whether it's MDT as a service, hey, we're looking at your network and we're seeing these things. Some of the issues that we have is that, and I was just talking with one of our A6 majors yesterday about it, and he was reinforcing a lot of things that I know to be true. He's actually going to be on our panel, so come out and listen to Major Akita. He'll be there. He's got a lot of good things to say from the A6. But it's hard. People go to the A6 and they're like, hey, we want to put these capabilities out. We want to put that capability. It's so cool. And there are a lot of great capabilities. However, the 6 is tied to a lot of like programmatic stuff that we just can't be like, yeah, you know what? Let's just start fielding this out. All of us, we don't have necessarily the manning to be able to field every single thing that a wing needs, or that an ACE deployable comm team is going to need if they're with a bunch of, with their fighter wing or their fighter squadrons or their bomber squadrons and so on. It's just hard to do that because people's requirements are niche to what they're doing, and everybody has a different capability and a different idea of how they would like to see that put out there. And I've seen that because when I was at the 19th, that was literally our position. I wanted certain capabilities, and it's important to align with the A6 on a lot of the stuff that they're doing. And that will make it beneficial. For instance, if they're going to the CSFC, and maybe if you're a unit out there, maybe you want to say, hey, how can we use CSFC? And let me reach out to the A6 and see how we can get on the CSFC environment. And then understanding that, hey, we might field capabilities that we have to, as a wing or as a squadron even, that we might have to sustain, that we have to make it our own program, that we need our own training program. And to be honest, one of the issues with that is sometimes people are not in a unit long enough to be able to just keep that going. I was in the fighter squadron for 2 years. And by the time I figured out what we could do, it was, I had a lot of additional duties on top of all the networks we supported. And because it's a small unit, we have requirements that we have to, like the pilots, they have a lot of requirements. So everybody steps up and does what they need to move the mission forward. But, I'm only there for so long, and then I'm going to move. By the time I understand what needs to be there and start working toward it with the budget, how do we say, the budget cycle, I need this. It's $150,000. Okay, well, we need to do this. 5 months, 6 months later, 4 months later, it's purchased. 3 months later, maybe it arrives. 3 to 6 months later, it arrives. So, I mean, that's like half the time somebody's going to be in a unit. That's like 2 years. If they're in a unit 2 years, and if they're 3 years, maybe that's, maybe they got sufficient time, but, there's issues like that. So being able to build a capability and then build sustainment, figure out what it's going to do, how to document that, and then being able to carry that on to the next person. You need just more than just a cyber team. You need leadership buy-in, and oversight to make sure that the stuff moves forward.
Right, sure. And what would you say are kind of the skills you've needed to be an operations flight chief in the cyberspace systems squadron at PACAF? I mean, it seems like jack of all trades, but obviously there's some special skills there. Can you talk about that?
Yes, I can switch gears here. We're very tactical, so we're getting a little bit more into the leadership. I'll be honest. When I first got to the CSS, promoting out of the fighter squadron, going from tech sergeant to master sergeant, I was a little. I didn't know what a flight chief was at this point. I worked at the MCCC for a while. There's no real flight chief. You have a I forget what they call it, branch. I think they call it branch chief. I guess it's similar, but it's a little different when you're on staff. And then the last time I really had a flight chief was when I was a staff sergeant over at the AOC in Germany. So, I have to cycle back to all the flight chiefs I know and think about what did they do? How did they do it? What do I want to learn from them? And how am I going to do it? So I was at a point like I'm gung ho. I'm an optimist. I'm going to look at this job and I'm going to figure out like this is a job where I want to be at. Why? Well, the Air Force said I'm going to be here. So if I want to be here, that's, it's a little bit different than like, oh, I have to be here. So when the Air Force tells me that I'm going to be here, I now want to be here because it's just the way I am, honestly. But it's beneficial to buy in. And I think going from a cyber, comm team lead for a fighter squadron and switching gears to an operations flight chief at PACAF CSS was eye-opening experience. I had, it was definitely thrown to the fire. I'm in charge of one program. Well, actually, I guess I had a plethora of programs at the 19th, but it was just me and another guy. Going here, now I have a team of people that do the actual hard labor. And it's my job to make sure that it happens in the appropriate manner. So it is kind of a jack of all trades. We had multiple disciplines. For instance, the CSS operations flight is responsible for geeks across, really it was at Hickam initially, but now they've expanded their footprint to across to the theater. So we're now supporting other bases. They're linked to the common operating picture. And then there's also CSS has shuffled things around a little bit to try to make room for more mission and to streamline the way we're doing things. But at the time, the ops flight also had event management, which was basically a comm focal point for the theater and for the headquarters for people to be able to route issues to. Hey, I have a problem. I don't know who to call. You route it to them. They help you get there. We also had SharePoint at the time, which has since moved to Enterprise. And then Then our bread and butter is a virtual desktop infrastructure. Now that and CSFC, mind you, the secure view. And those are beasts. Those are a lot of work. It take up a lot of time. But it's really rewarding work, knowing that what we do has an impact on our users across the theater. We have a pretty robust user base, and we try to provide them the best support that we can give them. We're currently working a big upgrade on that system, and I'm excited to see where it's going to go into the future. I'm no longer the ops flight chief. I've since shifted over to the plans and projects flight chief. Now we have a really small flight. Our flight is 5 people. The plans and projects flight is only 5 people, and only 3 of them are projects, to include myself, which I'm just on overage at this point. But I love the work that we do. It's very rewarding. You have a lot of say in how things happen, the way these projects are implemented, how we can, the features and capabilities that we can implement across the theater. It's very, I've learned a lot.
Sure, and I'll ask you about the new role you're moving into. But first, what's it like to work in the Indo-Pacific AOR? I know I got to come to the big AFCEA conference that you mentioned, the TechNet Indo-Pacific, 2 years ago. And, it was like 11, 12-hour flight from Virginia. And I always knew Hawaii was far, but you get a more of an understanding of the remoteness of, where Hickam is, but then the AOR is enormous. What's it like to work in that AOR, and what are the considerations? Or, you kind of talked about it a little bit, but what all did you have to deal with or think about for that AOR compared to maybe USAF or something?
That's a great question. So there's a lot to this. So I'll try to keep it to the highlights. Obviously, people talk about tyranny of distance, and until you're on an airplane, you're flying over what seems like a million miles of water. You're like, oh my gosh, there's still water out here. You go take a nap and you wake up and you're like, man, there's still water. And then you realize that we have to have supply chains. We need to have communications out there. And then you start seeing like, well, what are the communications capabilities out there, and what are the issues? And you're like, well, there's cables under the water. Well, there's those. And there's satellites. And you're like, and then there's radio frequencies. And then you're like, man, if anything happens to anything, it's super, it's fragile. It's really kind of fragile. So max capabilities. I'm a totally max capabilities kind of guy. When I worked at the fighter squadron, I was always about when if the commander said, "Hey, I want this capability and that capability and maybe that capability," I took a mental note. I was like, all 3. We're getting all 3 max capabilities, because you don't know what you're going to need and when you're going to need it. And so honestly, that's a huge part of it. If we have to plan for everything. Really got to plan for it. You got to plan for, hey, what if this gets cut, or what if this gets jammed, or what if both of them happen? What are we going to do? And that's why I think CSFC is very valuable, because especially a data at rest, because you can hop on a commercial link and then you can trickle data in, and hopefully we haven't completely tested all of this stuff, which we're looking to test soon. But that's the idea that, I like to see, is that despite, even if there's minimal communications presence, we can leverage capabilities, hopping around, communications, whether, it's through aircraft communications, hopping to other aircraft and so on, things like that. Maybe we can get the ability to talk whatever way, shape, or form, by hook or by crook, is the idea. And so that we're never left a unit out there that can't communicate back to, the AOC or higher headquarters, or, ask for help. So to me, that's the gist of it. The tyranny of distance, and then the real fragility of communications. Now, we look at it from our perspective, and we have that. And yet But anybody that we're going to be competing with also has to deal with the same thing. And so it might be closer to, say, their area, but there's still a tyranny of distance for them as well. However, we do have that huge gap in between, basically Hawaii and the US that you have to cover, which basically takes about 5 to 6 hours. So, um, so it's very important that we're prepared already on the ground, ready to hold off any aggression, anything, until that help arrives. And that's one thing that I keep raising to our guys, when we're talking about power and making sure, like, well, what if the system doesn't get full power? Can't you limit it and all this stuff? And I say, well, these systems, well, they're really beefy and we can put them out there. The time when you need them the most is going to be the time when they're receiving that max connections, when you're maxing them out. And that's the time when you're going to want them the most, on a day to day. And we don't know when that is. Let's just be honest. We don't really know when that is. So if the time you want your system the most, all of a sudden the power trips and you're like, oh shoot, I don't I don't have the system that I want because we something happened, ACC is flooding in theater, AFMC is flooding in theater, AMC, all these MAJCOMs, major commands, are flooding in the theater, and they all want to get on VDI or other stuff, and now we're like, oh crap, we gotta plan it. It's too late at that point. You got to plan that stuff now. And so that's what my team and I we're working hard to understand this stuff and make sure that our systems are robust and that they can withstand. I'm going to say not necessarily the adversaries, but our own, really us. They need to withstand us. And so I think we're most likely to deny ourselves at this point, and sometimes maybe an adversary might.
Over the years, we've increased our infrastructure on Guam. I know DISA has put a lot of infrastructure in, and even on the Northern Mariana Islands, Rhoda and Tinian. What can you talk about there as far as, we obviously are guests to those nations, and kind of, obviously have to have good relationships with, these island nations. I guess how hard is that for the US? I know there's been, decades of efforts of building up relationships there, but anything you can offer from your perspective of what you saw in those kind of operations?
So my essay on that, when I was with the 15th Wing, I went to Guam, I went to Japan, um, and I didn't really get too much with the host nations, but I have seen it from the side. I've seen, our lieutenant went, to Cobra Gold, and he worked with some of the nations over there, looking at, cyber stuff. I'm not quite sure what they did, since I didn't get a chance to go, but I know that it's very important to us. The bottom line, it is very important to us. We want professional, personal relationships with these people to be able to build that rapport with them to so that we can rely on them. We want to understand them and we want them to understand us. We want them to know that we are the valuable ally to have. They want us on their side, and we, not just that, we want them on our side.
And then after 8 years at Hickam, you're going in country to Korea. Can you talk about your role and what you'll be doing?
To be very honest, I don't know. I wish I had a little bit more of a grasp on what it was that I was getting into. Um, but yeah, unfortunately, I was, I'm going to Camp Humphreys, with my wife, and she's active duty Army, and she's right now, TDY, working on her, next career change. Hopefully, it's her last one.
And your wife is, she's a nurse, I think, right? That you said?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing to kind of be able to be to PCS to another location. And obviously the both of you can go and your family can go, your kids can go. Can you talk about kind of the logistics of, getting all your ducks in a row to get everybody over there and get everybody squared away? How hard is that?
Well, man, so it's difficult all the way around. My commander, my leadership has been really, really great. Um, Colonel Baroga, and then Senior Rawls and soon to be Senior Master Sgt. Harold from just moving over to PACAF CSS from the A6. Really a great team of people in CSS, and they've been really understanding just the craziness of having an active duty Army spouse and her being in Texas. Obviously, I have to cover down a lot. Before she was a commander, and I'm very proud of her for doing all that work. It was a lot, a lot on her, but it kept our family situated here. Provided, honestly, oddly enough, stability. Being a commander, you're like, man, your hours of this, your hours of that. You would think things might be unstable, but it actually did provide a level of stability. It kept her on island, out of any crazy deployments might take her away for 6 to 9 months, and being with her kids, which severely miss her just for the 3 weeks that she's been in Texas. It is a lot to do, but it'll all get done. And I think it's very important to enjoy the struggle, as much as that may sound weird, because it'll be over soon. We'll be at our next assignment. We might be retired someday, and I'll look back and I'll say, you know what, just enjoy the moment. And I would highly recommend anybody, if you're going through that kind of stuff, enjoy the moment.
And what will you think about living in Korea? I guess, the culture, the language, the food, anything you're looking forward to there or maybe apprehensive about?
Well, this will be my second time in Korea. Actually, it'll be my wife's second time in Korea as well. My first assignment was the 607th, let's see, ACOMS, and then they changed it to support squadron. I don't know if they're back to ACOMS, but uh, I enjoyed Korea. I enjoyed it very much so. A lot of people go over there and they just party hard and they're like, man, I can't wait to leave. It's like, okay, but I didn't do that. I was hiking the mountains, I was touring Seoul. I was seeing all the sights. I was working hard, of course, I had time. And I enjoyed the peninsula, and I look forward to going back with my family, enjoying it again, getting my boys into hiking lots of steps. Probably hundreds of thousands of steps I've had to hike on their mountains, time and time again. But I'm looking forward to doing different things, maybe some things that I didn't do last time.
And I'm sure it's beautiful. I'm sure all that hiking, that will give them a love of the outdoors that they'll have, forever.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was the mountains around Seoul, Bukhansan. It's surreal. When I first got there, I'm like, wow, these are surreal looking mountains. I've never seen mountains like this before.
Any tips for people who are PCSing around the world? Do you weigh your furniture? I know there's a certain limit in moving things. How do you pack everything up? That kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say definitely keep an eye on your valuable things. I don't want to, I've had things disappear. It could have been my fault. It really could have been my fault. And just make sure that you know that what that stuff is, and that you know exactly where it is and where it's going to be.
Right, sure. And I have a couple friends who, I guess, early on got the advice to buy a house in a location at maybe an air base where they might be returning to over their career, or it's kind of a central place, and then rent it out over the years. I guess, what advice do you have there, and how hard is that to do?
Well, looking back, that was easy, but probably at the time it was difficult. Um, Hawaii, that is actually great advice. And when we first came to Hawaii, my wife and I, we both had 3-year assignments, and I wanted to buy a house. Matter of fact, I wanted to buy a house years ago. Well, I was in Germany, but I wasn't going to buy a house in Germany. So I realized when I finally go back to the States, the 50 states, not necessarily CONUS, I intend to buy a house. Now, coming to Hawaii, if you're going to buy a house, the best time to do it is the time that you get there. So if you think that you're going to come back to Hawaii, if you may like it, doesn't really matter. The best time to buy a house is the time to get there.
And then do you have to get a property manager to help with the renting process kind of while you're overseas and the renters living in the house, or how does that work?
Well, I don't know if you have to, but I would say the best way to do it is to just pay that. We are going to get a property manager, and we're happy with with that decision. I think that it allows us to just focus on our work, our assignment, our family, and not have to worry about our house. So definitely, I would recommend a property manager.
How did you originally go into the Air Force? Did you know at a young age that you wanted to go into the Air Force, or, how was that process? And kind of when did you figure out that you wanted to do that?
Well, that's a little exciting tale of itself. So I joined a little bit later. I was 22 when I joined. Um, Before that, I was a carpenter. Uh, and let's see, I did tree trimming work for a little while, and I was the stop slow sign flagger on the road. I learned stuff at all those jobs, and that you sometimes you don't know some of the things you're going to need later in life. So, like I said, enjoy the struggle of where you're at when you're there, because a lot of times we get impatient and we're like, you know, I think the mentality is, hey, I'm going to graduate college and I'm going to get a six-figure job. The mentality is there, but that may not be the reality. So enjoy the where you're at when you're there, and fight your way to where you want to be. For me, that's been what I've done. I was always looking to do more, do better. As I was a carpenter, um, I had great teachers. I learned some lessons. I feel like I learned lessons the hard way sometimes. But my boss, he was pretty patient and let me make mistakes. Obviously, they rub it in sometimes because what else are you gonna do when you're 18? But there's a story. He gave me this floor to lay down, underfloor. It wasn't even a floor, but the underfloor. And he's like, Mike, make sure that the rough side is facing up. And so I was like, yeah, rough side's facing up. Measure it, got it all cut in place. And he said, make sure the rough side is facing up. So I cut everything. I laid down there. That floor is the underfloor, not even the floor. The underfloor is flawless. It fits in there. The gap is like a quarter inch or less. And I look at it, he's like, wow, that's really nice. He looks at it, something's wrong. Something's wrong with this floor. And he touched it and he picked it up and he's like, yeah, rough side done the bottom. I was like, oh, man. It was at that point I knew I needed to do something else. And it came time to look for other things again. And my buddy online said, hey, why don't you consider the Air Force? He's like, I'm talking to a recruiter right now. And I said, you know what? That's a great idea. I only thought of the Army. My grandfather was in the Army. He fought on Saipan and Okinawa, of which I want to pause there for a second. I just want to give a shout out. The unit that I was in, the 19th, actually supported my grandfather while he was on Saipan and Okinawa. And so I think it was more directly on Saipan, but it was a very it was an awesome opportunity to be able to go to the Marianas Islands, even though over on Guam, to be able to with the unit that supported my grandfather while he was storming the beaches of Saipan. So I just wanted to say that. And again on Okinawa, I decided that I was going to give the Air Force a try. So I talked to a recruiter, scored really well in the ASVAB, and he's like, "What do you want to do?" And I still remember the recruiter. I put airfield systems management and then cyber as my second. He switched them on me. He put cyber as my number one and airfield systems management as my number two. And I looked at that. I was like, I don't know how to feel about this, but you know what? Let's see what happens. And you know what? It was probably the best thing because I like doing the stuff that I do.
I love how your recruiter really understood your core skills, although it's funny that he didn't let you
Well,
know, like, hey, I switched.
he was a Marine
Uh,
prior. It was funny. I had a recruiter who was prior Marine, and he's like, hey, any job in the Air Force is a good job. And so I actually, I remember that, and I actually concur with that. Looking back, I concur with that. Any job in the Air Force is a good job.
And you've been such an asset to the AFCEA chapter in Hawaii, playing many roles, especially director and vice president of emerging leaders. Can you talk about kind of what led you to AFCEA and kind of your experiences there and kind of takeaways?
Yeah, so actually my relationship with AFCEA goes all the way back to Korea. My very first assignment. I was a member in Korea, and then you don't know what things are. It was totally different lifestyle for me, totally different. I'll just say I didn't know a lot of things. So I didn't do much in Korea. I went over to Germany. I don't remember if I did much with the chat. I went to a couple meetings in Germany, but my focus wasn't necessarily on that at the time. I was an airman still. I wanted to go snowboarding. I wanted to tour the battlefields of Europe. Wanted to see all the sites and stuff. And I wasn't quite ready to get involved with something that was going to take my time away from that. And looking back, I probably could have done all of it. But it's a little bit of what you know at the time. And so I just remember that all the NCOs coming in, it's like, there's AFCEA this, AFCEA that. And, I was like, oh man, they want to pull me away from my work and all this stuff at the time. And, but, I'm happy for the times that I did get to go. I actually really appreciate those opportunities, getting to see what people are doing. And then when I got to Hawaii, I always kept AFCEA in my mind as an organization that I could get involved with. I like what it does. I like what it stands for. And I like the potential of, like, really the sky's the limit. Like, what do you like to teach people? Well, volunteer to set up a tech talk or something and teach people something that you know. You like to mentor people? Well, we'll set up a mentoring uh, event where we get a bunch of mentors in and we'll come mentor people. So really, this guys, you want to reach out to schools and you want to, talk with the students about, their careers and the decisions that they're going to make that are going to be important to their life. AFCEA is an avenue to do all that stuff, and you can have a huge impact on people's lives. And I really got to see that. My first real, I actually don't know how I saw it, but I saw an advertisement for an AFCEA event, and I went there. It was Jeff Bloom was the president of the AFCEA chapter at the time. I think Brandon Lester was the VP, and I went there with my kid, my 18-month-old. I really wanted to go. I think my wife was working, and I wanted to do something, so we went to this place, and I met Jeff, and he's like, Mike, you should get involved with the chapter. I didn't know what that meant. I really didn't know what that meant. So I'm like, what's a chapter do? It's like, well, Cyber Patriot sounds like something FCA would do. So I volunteered for Cyber Patriot, got involved with the community and stuff like that. And then a little bit later, he's like, yeah, you're still not getting involved with the chapter like I want you to. And so I'm like, I don't know what that means. So I put a volunteer thing in, a volunteer request in, and they put me into the membership committee. So I applied for the membership committee. It was something that I knew nothing about. I don't know about recruiting. I didn't know anything about talk salesmanship, even though I had my own computer company. I guess I say I didn't know anything, but I kind of do. And I was working with Neil Ferradini, who was the VP of the membership committee, AFCEA Hawaii membership. Unfortunately, it was during COVID, and that was when things were kind of slow. We were trying to figure out what we could do to during COVID, so it was extremely limited. I know big thing were online events. I'm not a big online kind of guy. I don't, I'm a cyber guy. You think, oh, let's meet people online. I don't like that. I'd like to meet them in person. Um, so things kind of progressed from there. After COVID ended, we slowly ramped up to doing more events. I actually stepped over to the Emerging Leader Committee after the VP for that was leaving. She had a PCS, so I filled in that role. And I was excited for that. And I really, it was a learning experience. So our president, I think it was Linda Newton at the time, she revamped it so that, hey, if you're a VP, you're also on the board of directors. And to be honest, I had no idea what that meant. So I was, I was here to learn, or I was there to learn and to understand and to try to do my best for the organization and for the people that were in it. Um, so so I did. And I appreciate, man, there's so many people I could just say I learned from. But it's really all of them. There's all the presidents, there's Linda Newton, Jeff Bloom, Don Cloud, Dick Palmieri, and Brandon Lester. And then just, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Yogi Fong. Great people, and our tip lead, Cynthia Pacheco, just great people. I just learned so much from them. And sometimes the most important thing to do is just be quiet. And then, sitting on the board, I learned that, I have to understand those things that I want to make happen and be able to learn how to bring that to the board so that we can get funding for it. And again, great people in the Hawaii chapter, they're open to fund a lot of things for us, with a vision, a little bit of a plan, and an idea of what we're trying to accomplish. They've said yes many times, and I appreciate their willingness to be able to just get out there in the community and make things happen. Emerging leaders there's always ways to get things funded. Anybody who's involved with AFCEA knows that, you can get sponsors, you can ask for funding, from your local chapter, and we can get, we've had scholarships and grants that, we've stood up here in the chapter. We supported the Lahaina fires, and sending money over to the people that needed help. And the chapter has done a lot of great things, and I could talk about it for a long time, to be honest. But I really thank for the opportunity that I had. And I think that Andrea Gagnon, she's our new director and VP, and then Mason Millsap, he's our deputy. They're a great team. They've already rallied a lot of people to the Emerging Leader Committee that are excited about what's going to happen. And they're doing a great job. I'm really looking forward to TechNet this year with the panel, which is going to be about DDIL, denied, degraded, intermittent, lost. I think that's what it stands for. I should know, right? But and then there's going to be a social event after. It's something that I always wanted to do, was a social event in combination with the Emerging Leader panel. And this year we're finally going to make that happen. And I highly recommend, we're going to have a really good panel. All the, I won't say all the components, but, we'll have the Marines, the Air Force, the Army, and the Navy all represented on that panel to talk about, the endeavors that we're taking to make things happen and how industry can get involved. And we're always looking to do new things and with our emerging leaders. And I really hope a lot of ELs show up.
Right, sure, yes. And the conference you're mentioning, of course, we've talked about a couple of times, TechNet Indo-Pacific. It will be October 28th through the 30th this year. It's usually October, sometimes early November, but it's definitely the show to go to. It just draws in, the leadership from the Indo-PACOM AOR and gives you such an inside view. And the chapter itself, I know from coming from headquarters, I get to see a lot of chapters, and they're all very special. But given the remoteness of Hawaii and just, even getting yourself out there, the AFCEA Hawaii chapter is really special. It's really a family, and the depth and breadth of knowledge of the leadership within the chapter is quite amazing. And as you mentioned, it's a great supporter in the community in Honolulu and the other islands too. I know there's been,
Yes.
capture the flags, competitions, robotics, bringing in, school kids, grants to teachers, scholarships, that sort of thing. So it really is a special place. So if you're at Pick'em or Pearl or Schofield, definitely, get involved in the chapter. And especially if you're under 40, as Michael says, get involved in that emerging leader community, because it really is an amazing view. And I guess selfishly, I loved it during COVID because things were digital and I could listen in from Virginia to the chapter meetings. And
Yeah.
gosh, I learned a ton. And so now I'm like, oh, wish I could be in Hawaii next month for that luncheon they're having, because they're bringing in, such great expertise. So,
Yeah, for real. It's I look forward to TechNet. I actually take leave to attend TechNet. So um it seems like, what? You take leave? Can't your command just let you go? Yes, they can, but there's strings attached if you're not on leave. So I like to just be there, as a board or former board of, I'm on the advisor committee right now, board advisors. But as a, on the board of directors, I felt like it was my responsibility to be there the whole time to help with whatever issues, that the we may need. If we need somebody to, one of the volunteers didn't show up. Okay, well, I can do that. If you want somebody to talk about membership, well, I can do that all day. If you want to just interface with emerging leaders, yeah, sure, easy. I love talking to those guys. They're great. It's refreshing. It's great to not just tell them about what we do here, but hear about what their vision is for their life and what they want to do.
And on top of your, other adroit and many talents, we can call you a writer. You wrote a great column for Signal Magazine. If people don't know, we have a monthly column called Disruptive by Design, and it's geared towards those under 40, as the authors. And so I really enjoyed your column last year about kind of basic skills you need for leadership, including reading, which I thought was such a great thing to highlight.
Oh, it calls my name. It does call my name. Every now and then I get this itch to start writing on something. But, sometimes if I don't have somebody being like, hey, when are we going to get that? Sometimes it doesn't happen as much as I would like it to. But yeah, I actually really enjoyed, sometimes, I thought maybe it might be a little bit more. Everybody wants to read the tech. They were like, what about the tech? We Signal does a great job on talking about all the tech. It really does. You can look at Signal Magazine and you can read about technology, and you can read senior leaders on how they're implementing things or their vision to implement things. And it's very important to be able to master those skills. And I think it's the most beneficial. You could be the best engineer in the world, but if you can't convey a thought appropriately, people are going to write you off.
Yeah, we'll post a link to it and encourage anybody else to kind of write, especially about soft skills or, things you need, in your career that are so important other than the technology.
Yeah, well, plans and projects, it's crucial. I can't talk about how crucial being able to, plans and projects are for what I do, for what we do every day, for what our warfighters do, being able to implement things. And the biggest part of that is writing, reading, and speaking.
Well, thank you for all you've done for the chapter. It's really been tremendous. So thank you for all your efforts over the years. And I know, AFCEA, obviously we're international. There's chapters around the world. There's, of course, a Seoul chapter that will be a couple hours away if you're in Osan. And I know there's a big conference, usually in the spring, I think, called LandPack TechNet Korea, which is kind of AUSA, the Association of the United States Army, with AFCEA, kind of a co-event. So, look out for that if you're in Korea. And I
Yep.
don't want to take too much more of your time. Anything else you wanted to share or highlight?
I think we hit a lot of the highlights. I was working with my assistant, ChatGPT, just talking through stuff like, hey, bouncing ideas off of like, hey, what do I talk about? But honestly, I think we hit everything and more. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, Kim. I feel like I've met you in person maybe one time. Did we meet in one person?
I
It was
think it was a blur. Yes, it was when I did get to come to TechNet Indo-Pacific, but it was probably for a second because I was running around trying to gather, listen to as many sessions of the great
of
sessions as
course.
I could.
Yep.
But I think it was very brief. And other than that, it's just been, through emails. But yeah, I'm so glad to, talk to you today. And thank you so much for walking through your experience and kind of your perspective of, being in the Indo-Pacific AOR. It's a fascinating region and so important to our national security, even going forward. So thank you for that.
Agreed. Yeah. No, thank you for the time, and hopefully, get the opportunity to write another article or do this again someday.
Sure. Thank you, Michael.
All right. Take care, Kim.